remember starting out having this weird loner nature. I was very antisocial in kindergarten. During recess, I would just be running around the playground by myself. I got out of that pretty quickly, and the rest of elementary school, 2nd through 5th grade, I didn't fit the description of being a loner. I talked with people in class, ate with people at lunch, played with people at recess, and I did have people that I considered to be my friends. I lived 30 minutes away from my elementary school, which meant that I really didn't get to see people outside of school. I didn't get to go to people's houses. I wasn't obviously involved with community organizations that were closer to that district. It would have just been too much of a burden driving back and forth on top of the already long commute to and back from school. I also wasn't really involved in a lot of activities closer to where I lived, where I was still interacting with other people. Because of that, outside of school, I didn't really get any social interaction. I technically got a below average amount of social interaction from a really young age. That also might play into why I have such poor social skills now. 5th through 7th grade was when I peaked socially. 5th through the beginning of 7th grade, and we'll get into that. Hangouts was really big towards the end of elementary school, and I started using that to talk to people outside of school. I also moved closer to the school whenever I was in 6th grade, so I was able to go to people's houses or go to birthday parties. Hanging out with friends outside of school wasn't a regular occurrence for me. I still only went to about 3 people's houses total in all of my years in school. There was never a point where I was a socialite. I had about 2 good friends that I consistently talked to outside of school, go to their birthday parties. At that time, that was all that I really needed. That little time period was the only phase after those early elementary school years where I didn't feel expendable to people, or feeling like that throwaway option that people only go to when they need somebody or didn't have anybody else. Whenever I got deeper into middle school, those feelings really started to consume my outlook on friendship. Navigating the social landscape of middle school and high school caused me a lot of disillusionment. My experiences ended up being a lot different than what I envisioned for myself. At this point, friendship was gradually being phased out of my life. The first situation that caused that initial shift in my outlook on friendship was towards the beginning of 7th grade. I had a friend who, in 7th grade, we were in the same lunch period. For the first few weeks of the school year, we would always sit at the same seats together at the end of the lunch table. One day, they randomly started sitting away from those seats with another group of people, and the group of people they started sitting with weren't a group of people that I would have been welcomed into. Without saying too much, I'm sure if I would have approached him and just said, "Can I sit with you?" he wouldn't have said no, but I know if I would have, it would have just been an awkward tag along. I didn't sit directly next to the group, but I sat at the end of the same table that they were sitting at. It looked like I was still sitting in proximity of the group. After a few weeks, these girls started sitting directly across from the seat that I was sitting at. I wasn't completely alone, but then after some time, the girls randomly stopped sitting at those seats, and the group that I was trying to sit in proximity to, that my old friend was a part of, they would leave in the middle of the lunch and they wouldn't ask me if I wanted to go with them, which wasn't a surprise. So I would just sit at the end of that long table completely by myself. I felt really uncomfortable approaching other groups and asking them if I could sit with them, just because in middle school, people were really territorial about where they were sitting in the cafeteria, and they acted like the seat that they sat in every day was their property that nobody else was entitled to. So I would just sit at the end of that table by myself. It's obviously embarrassing enough sitting at a long table by yourself, but one of my most embarrassing moments was one day whenever I was sitting at the table, this group of 8th grade girls saw me and they felt bad for me, so they got out of their seats and started running towards me. Whenever they were running to me, the coaches yelled at them for getting out of their seats. The coaches yelling at them drew attention to me, so everybody in the cafeteria at that time saw me sitting alone by myself at that table. I remember during that moment getting some really awkward and judgmental looks from people that were looking directly at me. A few days later, somebody even brought up that encounter to me in a way that I'm sure was supposed to be meant as a joke. Really, after that encounter, I felt way too embarrassed to even eat in the cafeteria anymore, so I just started going into the classroom during lunch, and I would eat in the room with the people that were assigned to be there because they hadn't finished their work. The next situation was also in the 7th grade. I had somebody who I was friends with who I couldn't have eaten lunch with because I wasn't in the same lunch period as them. This person invited me to their birthday party. At the birthday party, there were 2 other people. One of them I perceived to be a friend. The other one was somebody who I didn't really have a rapport with. The entire birthday experience was really uncomfortable for me. I don't believe that the 3 of them were deliberately trying to alienate me, but I still felt like an outcast around them. I was definitely the odd one out lot of their group. At the beginning of the party, I was trying to make jokes and be funny, and people weren't really laughing at them or even pretending to, which I don't blame them because I was not funny at all. And I definitely was trying too hard. But also whenever I would chime into conversations or just say anything, it seemed like none of them were really resonating with me or what I had to say. And eventually I just stopped talking during the party because of how embarrassingly clear it was that I just wasn't going to connect with them. It almost started to feel like one of those situations where somebody only invites you to something because their parents told them to. I was the first person they dropped off home. I believe that after they dropped me off, the three of them just continued to hang out for a lot longer. A couple of days later at school, my friend who was also invited to the party told me that after they had all dropped me off, the host of the party shared some really personal things about me. So after school that day, I got very heated and I sent them a bunch of really angry texts berating them and attacking their character, and that was the end of our friendship. Love that. I still perceived myself to be friends with the person who told me, but they were also still friends with the other two people that were at the birthday party. It was clear that I wasn't as close with this person as I thought I was. There was one day when all of the 7th graders just had the same lunch period, and I started off the lunch sitting with the friend. The party host and the other person that was at the party walked by us, and I remember the party host signaling the friend to come here. So the friend left me to go sit with them, and I was just left sitting by myself again. I'm not even going to get into all the examples, but there were just other instances that demonstrated that I clearly wasn't close friends with this person as I thought I was. This person mainly would only talk to me whenever they needed something or they just didn't have anyone else around that would talk to them. And after the party ordeal, we really didn't connect on much of anything else except talking negatively about the party host, who they were still friends with. So I also suspected that if he was talking negatively about his close friend around me, there was a good chance that he could have been talking negatively about me when he was around the other two people. The party host did share with me that they were also involved with saying some personal things about me, so the entire situation just felt really icky. So to wrap up the story, I just stopped talking to everyone who was involved. I learned my lesson from the angry text situation and didn't make a huge spectacle about it. I just gradually distanced myself from the person, and that was the end of that. So the last situation wasn't really a situation, but more of an example with another friend who I met towards the end of elementary school. This was the person that I had the closest friendship with. This was the first person from school whose house I went to. This was the first person that I contacted outside of school. It was a very key friendship in my early life, but eventually this person started saying and doing things that really offended me. I won't get into exactly what they said, but a lot of the time when I was around them, I started feeling like that character in a sitcom that's constantly at the butt of a lot of the jokes and put downs. From my perspective, I was almost becoming a verbal punching bag to them. Looking back, I don't fully see it that way anymore. Like I said before, a lot of the time people use teasing and slick comments as a form of endearment. While I didn't take what they were saying as endearing, it would have been more constructive for me to just share that with her. But instead of doing that, I just started acting really distant around her. Whenever she would talk to me, sometimes I just wouldn't really say a whole lot, and I was just gradually losing interest in connecting with her. And the last straw for me was whenever I went to her house after the last day of 8th grade. I was already generally a pretty sensitive person at this time, especially when it came to a few specific areas. And the day before I went to her house, I had experienced some really dramatic things, so I was in a lot more of a sensitive headspace than usual. Whenever I was at her house, her dad made a comment that was meant as a joke, but it targeted one of those sensitive areas. Whenever her dad made the comment, she started laughing. Her laughing at the comment mixed with some of the other things she was saying and doing caused her to be somebody that I just wasn't interested in being around anymore. Because communicating in a mature yet assertive manner was completely foreign to me, I just decided to silently end the friendship in my head and gradually distance myself from her. Instead of just having a reasonable conversation with her, I just kind of stopped talking to her. And it wasn't like I just ignored her. Whenever she did talk to me, I was still civil, but I think it would have just been more helpful for me to just bring it up to her. I don't think that she was mean-spirited about any of the things that she was saying and doing, so I'm sure she would have just not done them anymore, and I didn't even give them the chance to do that. Branching out and connecting with new people after all my friendships faded into obscurity was largely unsuccessful for me. Especially discouraging because whenever I was at school, I would look at everybody and I would see how everybody seemed to effortlessly have friends all over the place. It seemed like nobody struggled to find a secure friend group or multiple friend groups that they could easily rely on. Nobody seemed to struggle to find a partner in class when they needed to, and just in general, it seemed like nobody was experiencing the same social anguish that I was experiencing experiencing. I hated being in class when the teacher would ask people to pick partners for an assignment, because a lot of the time I didn't have anybody that I could easily be partnered with, and I would just have to be partnered with whoever else didn't have a partner. And sometimes it would be people that didn't have a partner because all their friends decided to pick somebody else to be partnered with, and so they were just stuck with me. I hated going to award ceremonies at the end of the year, because for the most part, whenever people would get their rewards, there would be a bunch of students cheering for them and clapping for them, and then whenever I would get my reward, there would be one or two people clapping and cheering for me, but it would pretty much be basically silent. Feeling isolated around people my age became normal for me. One thing that I would do sometimes is misread little interactions that I would have with other people. For example, in my PE class in freshman year, there was this group of people, a mix of males and females, and I thought I was becoming a part of this group, but then somebody in the group made a comment to the effect of, maybe the 7 of us should do something, and I was clearly the 8th person, and it was clearly not them miscounting. It was just very clear that I was not in that group. There was another instance when I would be in the classroom during lunch, and there was this girl who would also be in the classroom, and we were in the same class, so sometimes she would ask me for help with the homework, and sometimes she would just ask for my answers. I heard that giving people answers or helping them with their work was a good way to make friends, so I was reading into our interaction as a potential friendship. But then after I explained the assignment to her, or after I would give her homework answers, she would either get up to go to another seat, or she would just leave the classroom, and I would sit by myself in the classroom again. And I had other examples of that too. Sometimes I would be in class one day and I would just unexpectedly have a good conversation with somebody, and then outside of the classroom in the hallway, they wouldn't acknowledge me. There's also a few times when I would think that I was in a group and I just wasn't in the group, or I was constantly at the butt of more put downs and jokes. I just started to perceive myself as somebody that people didn't really talk to unless they needed something, or they didn't have anybody else to talk to, or they just wanted to be nasty. I didn't perceive myself to be friends with anybody. It was almost as if I was going to school with just a bunch of strangers. Sometimes I would say a few things to some people in class, but other than that, I didn't connect with anybody, and I was mostly just secluded from everybody. Quarantine happened the middle of my second semester of freshman year, and I was really stressed about the pandemic, but I was also pretty relieved to not have to go to school anymore. Being completely alone wasn't as bad whenever I wasn't constantly seeing everybody else effortlessly mingling with each other. School started opening back up the first semester of my junior year. I did go into school for those first couple of weeks, and again, I just went to school, didn't talk to anybody, walked around by myself at lunch, and then went home. And then after the first 2 weeks of my junior year, I switched to doing online school for the rest of high school, and whenever I left the school, I didn't keep in contact with anybody or tell anybody I was leaving, and that was that. Really, from the ages of 14 through 17, I lived a completely reclusive lifestyle. I didn't talk to anybody, I never hung out with people, I didn't even really leave the house unless it was to go somewhere with my family. I would talk to some people at virtual school through the virtual school program if it was something related to school. Other than that, I didn't have any leisure interaction with people my age. I just lived life by myself. I got really used to living like this to the point where I really didn't mind being alone. I didn't spend a lot of time soaking. I just came to be somebody who really valued their own space and peace, and I started to lean heavily into the notion of being your own best friend, but not from a place of bitterness anymore. I didn't have all of these pressures put on me to try to fit into what everybody else was doing. I was just fully with myself. That gave me a lot of space to reflect and mature, and it was almost as if having all that uninterrupted time by myself allowed me to have a clear and uninfluenced understanding of who I was. I'm not saying it would be completely healthy for everybody to be isolated for this long of a period, and I'm not even fully sure if it was completely healthy for me, but I know that I didn't become depressed and I didn't spiral on any level that I was aware of. I came out of it being a lot happier and more mature and just generally a better person. This year was the year where I started to try my luck at branching out again. My standard for branching out is probably a lot lower than the average standard, but from my perspective, I put in a lot more effort than I'm used to when it comes to connecting with people. I've pushed myself socially more at 19 than I have in the last 6 years. Weirdly enough, my experiences with branching out have caused me to fully accept that I'm probably never going to have a close group of friends, and that's okay. A lot of us grow up watching TV TV shows where there was either a pair of best friends or a group of best friends, and they were constantly around each other, constantly getting into these crazy shenanigans and just being there for each other through anything. And in my opinion, these media curated portrayals of friendship tend to skew our expectations of what friendship will look like in our lives away from being realistic. After several awkward encounters of me approaching people and talking to them, thinking it could be the start of some unlikely friendship, I have fully come to realize and accept that that Disney Nickelodeon movie fantasy of having that special, unwaveringly loyal friendship is just not practical or realistic, at least not for most people. I know there are some people that are lucky enough to have that best friend or that tight, loyal friend group. I don't believe that that represents the majority of people. I've given up on the idea of trying to make friends, and that doesn't necessarily mean that I've given up trying to talk to people. In my opinion, you shouldn't need to try to be friends with anybody. You either connect with the person or you don't. And if you don't connect with them, you all just aren't meant to be friends. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you all. It doesn't mean that you can't be associates or acquaintances. It just means that you all don't have that natural connection that I believe is there when it comes to real friendships. And if it's not there, there's no need to force it. And that sounds really harsh, but that's one thing that I've really learned, is that you either have that connection with somebody or you don't. Whenever I do reach out to somebody, I don't do it because I'm expecting to be best friends with them. Most of the time I'm expecting the interaction to be awkward, but I still do it just to prove that I'm not afraid to reach out. There's some room for improvement, but I have gotten a lot better with that. I have a few people that if we happen to be available at the same time, we can eat together. And then there's a couple of people outside of that who, if I happen to be in the same setting with them, I will be able to carry a conversation with them. I'm still somebody who spends the majority of their time alone, and I'm good with that for right now. I'm good with that being the extent of my social life. It's still an improvement from being completely alone and never talking to anybody, and I'm choosing to just appreciate where I'm at this point in time. Oftentimes, people are a lot lonelier than they appear to be. In school, we're used to seeing these large friend groups or seeing people's pictures and there's 15 people at their birthday party. Those of us who didn't have that experience are on the outside looking in, feeling really confused on how they're even able to have that. But with any large group of people, there are different dynamics that occur within that group that can't be seen from looking at a photo or from glancing at them in the hallway. There are likely people at the bottom of the group. There could be somebody who doesn't feel as valued or feels like they're constantly getting put down by the other people in the group. There could be someone that's the verbal punching bag of the group. Yes, there might have been 15 people at the party, but who's to say all those people are even friends with each other? Maybe going to each other's party or commenting on each other's photo is the extent of their interaction with each other. There's just so many different things that can't fully be understood from an outsider point of view. It doesn't seem practical to be best friends with 20 or 30 different people. So instead of looking at other people and basing the standards of our lives off of what they have, we need to be looking to ourselves and seeing what we can do to have better experiences. That leads me to my next point. There is no room for self-righteousness. And whenever I was a preteen / early teenager, I would always frame it as if I wasn't doing anything wrong. There was just this weird dark cloud over me that made it impossible for me to make friends with people. Thinking, why can't I have good friends? Why aren't people connecting with me? Yes, for some people, they do get outrageously bullied and outcasted by everybody, and I'm not even saying that I wasn't bullied throughout this time, but I also could have pushed myself to be more uncomfortable and talk to people that I could have connected with, and I could have had reasonable conversations with people when they did something to upset me. I could have reflected and apologized for times where I also might have made somebody feel ignored or expendable when they wanted to reach out to me, because I'm not gonna lie, I naturally am just not the warmest person. Sometimes it can come off like I don't want to talk to people. One thing that I've learned is that you never forget how people make you feel, even when it comes to little comments or little ways that people acted towards me to make me feel excluded. I still remember those things, and from that person's point of view, they probably haven't thought about it since then, but when you're on the receiving end of it, you remember it a lot more. And there definitely could be times where I came off that way to somebody else and didn't really think twice about it. That could have made somebody feel really bad. In the future, it's going to take me a lot longer and for me to consistently connect with somebody before actually referring to them as a friends. I just become a lot more reluctant with using the term friend with people, especially people that I haven't even known for that long. If I've only known somebody for a week, it would be hard for me to consider that person a friend. If I like the person and had positive interactions with them over the course of that week, then I might consider that person a budding acquaintance with the potential for a friendship. Maybe we might reach acquaintance status, but I'm just very reluctant with automatically considering people friends. I just have a more realistic outlook on what being a friend actually is versus what being an acquaintance is. You know, if I have two good conversations with a person, I still don't really know them that well. To me, I just don't really see that as a friend. And that's okay. I don't feel like not being friends with somebody or not seeing somebody as a friend has to be such a negative thing. If the only time you talk to somebody is when you just happen to be in the same class together, or the only time you interact with somebody is when you're liking their photo, is that really somebody who's your friend? If the way that I've framed my mindset to look at friendship has prevented me from feeling really disappointed, you know, if I have a good interaction with them, there's a chance that we could be friends, but I'm prepared and okay with the possibility that I might never speak to you again or connect with you ever again, and I will be fine regardless. Alright, so that is going to be it for this video. I really hope you all enjoyed it. I hope that everything that I said in this video made sense, because in my mind I'm thinking, does any of this even make sense? Because I stumble over my words so much while filming. But I'm just really relieved to finish this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all super soon. Peace.